Royal marriages were supposed to be about power, alliance, and the future of kingdoms. In theory, they joined empires, ended wars, and produced heirs who would continue royal bloodlines. But behind the golden crowns, grand ceremonies, and romantic portraits, history tells a much darker story. Because when love meets power and duty meets madness, royal weddings often turned into royal nightmares. For centuries, kings and queens didn't marry for love. They married for politics. Their spouses were chosen not by the heart, but by diplomats. Yet sometimes, even the best political match turned into disaster, ruled not by affection, but by jealousy, cruelty, and insanity. Let's step into the palaces where love turned into chaos and explore some of the most twisted royal unions in history. One of the most disturbing royal marriages began in the glittering court of France. King Charles VI, known in his youth as Charles the Beloved, was only 11 when he became king. At first, his reign promised peace and prosperity, but as he grew older, something terrible happened. Charles began to lose his mind. He suffered violent fits of madness, sometimes believing he was made of glass and would shatter if touched. On other occasions, he attacked his own servants or ran through the castle screaming that he was being chased. Doctors had no explanation. His madness would come and go, leaving his court terrified. But the real tragedy was his marriage. His wife, Queen Isabeau of Bavaria, was forced to rule in his place during his episodes. At first, she supported him, trying to protect his image. But as the years passed, the burden crushed her. Rumors spread that she took lovers, even that she had an affair with her husband's brother. Whether or not it was true, the scandal destroyed her reputation. Charles's madness divided the kingdom, and his marriage became a symbol of France's decay. Their children grew up in chaos, and one of their daughters was later married off to England's Henry V. Trying to mend a country their marriage had helped tear apart. It was a union built on duty, destroyed by madness, and remembered as one of the most tragic in royal history. But if France had its mad king, Spain had its own royal nightmare. The story of Joanna of Castile, forever known as Juana la Loca, or Joanna the Mad. Joanna was the daughter of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, the same rulers who funded Christopher Columbus. She was brilliant, deeply religious, and beautiful. But when she married Philip of Burgundy, something inside her began to unravel. At first, she loved Philip passionately, but Philip was charming, manipulative, and unfaithful. His affairs drove Joanna into jealousy and despair. She would scream, cry, and strike out in fits of anger. Her behavior grew more erratic with each betrayal. When Philip died suddenly in 1506, Joanna completely broke down. She refused to let anyone bury him. She traveled across Spain with his coffin, opening it again and again to look at his body. Witnesses said she would spend hours speaking to him, convinced he was only sleeping. Her father eventually locked her away, claiming she was insane, though some historians think it was a political move to keep her from ruling. Joanna spent the rest of her life in isolation, over 40 years imprisoned in a cold castle. Whether she was truly mad or simply heartbroken, her marriage became her prison, a love story that turned into a living nightmare. Across the Channel, England had its own share of cursed royal couples. Perhaps none were more infamous than King Henry VIII and his 6 wives, especially his doomed second queen, Anne Boleyn. Their story began as a romance that shook Europe. Henry was desperate for a son, and when Anne refused to be his mistress, he broke from the Catholic Church to marry her. At first, it seemed like passion had triumphed over politics, but power and paranoia soon poisoned their love. Anne gave Henry a daughter, the future Elizabeth I, but no son. Court gossip, religious turmoil, and Anne's fiery personality turned the king against her. Within 3 years, he accused her of adultery, witchcraft, and even incest with her brother. Historians believe these charges were fabricated, but it didn't matter. In 1536, Anne was beheaded in the Tower of London. Henry remarried just days later. It was one of history's cruelest betrayals, a marriage that began with obsession and ended with execution. But even Henry's next marriages weren't any happier. His 5th wife, Catherine Howard, was only a teenager when she married him. Henry, old and ill, was obsessed with her youth, but when he discovered she had been unfaithful, she too was executed. Henry VIII may have been the most powerful man in England, but in marriage, he was ruled by fear, vanity, and madness. Royal unions in other parts of Europe weren't much kinder. In Russia, Catherine the Great's marriage to Peter III was a disaster from the start. Peter was immature, cruel, and obsessed with toy soldiers. He would force Catherine to watch him play war games for hours. He also humiliated her publicly, parading his mistresses around court. Catherine endured it quietly, until she didn't. In 1762, she staged a coup, had her husband arrested, and took the throne herself. Peter died mysteriously soon after, officially from natural causes, though most believe he was murdered. Catherine went on to rule as one of Russia's greatest monarchs, but her rise began with one of the most twisted marriages in royal history, one that ended with a crown and a corpse. Sometimes the madness wasn't in one partner, but in both. In 19th century Bavaria, King Ludwig II was a dreamer, obsessed with art, music, and fairy tales. He built magnificent castles like Neuschwanstein, the inspiration for Disney's Sleeping Beauty castle. But his mind was fragile. He withdrew from politics, talked to imaginary friends, and spent fortunes on his fantasies. He was engaged to his cousin, Sophie, but broke off the engagement just before the wedding. Rumors about his mental state and his secret sexuality spread through Europe. Eventually, Ludwig was declared insane and removed from power. Shortly after, he was found dead in a lake alongside his psychiatrist under mysterious circumstances. His marriage never even began, but it was another example of how royal expectations crushed those who couldn't live by them. And not all twisted unions were medieval. In the 20th century, the world saw one of the most toxic royal relationships of all time: King Farouk of Egypt and Queen Farida. At first, they seemed glamorous, young, beautiful, adored by the people. But behind the palace walls, Farouk's behavior was erratic and cruel. He gambled, drank heavily, and collected luxury cars while his country fell into poverty. Farida suffered years of humiliation and infidelity before finally divorcing him. Even after their separation, Farouk's life spiraled out of control. He died young, overweight, in disgrace, living in exile. Their marriage, once celebrated as modern and romantic, ended as another example of royalty consumed by ego and excess. Throughout history, these unions show one truth: being royal never protected anyone from heartbreak or from madness. In fact, power often made everything worse. Kings and queens lived their lives under constant pressure to produce heirs, to please their people, and to hold on to power. Their marriages weren't just personal relationships, they were political contracts. When those contracts cracked, entire kingdoms suffered. The line between love and control blurred again and again. Sometimes it was one partner's insanity that doomed the union. Sometimes it was betrayal, lust, or ambition. And sometimes it was the sheer weight of royal duty that crushed two human beings under the crown. Modern royals like to present their marriages as fairy tales, but history reminds us that real royal love stories were often anything but. They were filled with manipulation, scandal, and tragedy. For every royal couple that found genuine affection, there were many who found only misery. From Charles VI and Isabeau's madness, to Henry VIII's bloody reign of love and fear, from Joanna the Mad's grief to Catherine the Great's coup, these marriages reveal a universal truth. Power and passion rarely coexist peacefully. Even behind palace walls, love can twist into obsession, trust can rot into paranoia, and duty, that noble word, can destroy the very people meant to uphold it. Maybe that's why we're still fascinated by royal couples today. Because deep down, we see that their struggles weren't so different from our own, only amplified by crowns, armies, and the eyes of the world. Every royal marriage promised stability and peace, but history shows that some of them brought only madness and ruin. And perhaps the saddest part is that those kings and queens, surrounded by wealth and servants clothed in gold, were often more trapped than anyone else. So next time you see a royal wedding on TV, remember the stories hidden in history's shadows, where love and power collided and the results were unforgettable.